Well, you just heard my analysis with Hugh Hewitt on what's going to happen on Tuesday. And if you missed it, well, just grab it on demand. You know how to do it. We're streaming after all. Now let's look at the polls and see if it supports our analysis. Tom Bevan is the grand poobah at Real Clear Politics. And boy, you must be getting a heck of a lot of traffic right now before this election coming up Tuesday, Tom.
Yeah, it's our business goes in cycles, obviously. And this is the busiest season.
Well, I want to start with Georgia, if you don't mind, because we just saw that echelon poll that I think is a real stunner, not only showing Herschel Walker coming out to, I think it's a 5 to 6 point lead, but he's over that 50% threshold. What do we know about this poll, and would this be an outlier right now based on what you're seeing in Georgia?
It is, and that's not one of the polls that we include in our Real Clear Politics average. Most of the polls in this race show it very, very close. I think we've got Walker up by less than a percentage point right now. Both candidates, by the way, are excluding that echelon poll, not getting anywhere near 50%. They're at 46, 47. And so, which would indicate to me that this is probably headed toward a runoff, unless, Herschel Walker manages to overperform and wins it outright on the back of Brian Kemp.
And Tom, is that because of an extraordinary number of undecided, or are there other parties represented there, Libertarian, Green Party, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few undecideds in this race. And I was just looking at the Marist poll that came out this morning has this race tied. And one of the most interesting aspects of this race, as well as the race in Arizona, for example, is how many will there be any ticket splitters? Will there be any voters who are going to vote for Brian Kemp but do not vote for Herschel Walker or end up voting, splitting their ticket and voting for Warnock and vice versa? It does seem like there's about 8% of folks, again, according to the Marist poll, and again, take into account margin of error, that are looking like they're going to vote for Kemp and or vote for Warnock, which could explain the difference between why Brian Kemp is polling 7, 8, 9 points consistently ahead of Stacey Abrams, but down below you've got this race which is essentially tied.
Right. Which, by the way, the whole idea of splitting your ballot amongst parties is very much in the nature of an Arizona voter. They've always been rather independent that way. So what is happening there? Because the dropout of the Libertarian candidate in that U.S. Senate race and then throwing his support to Blake Masters, that could make a big difference here in a tight race.
In a race this close, it really could. And I know a lot of people, a certain amount of people in Arizona have already voted. Early voting is underway. His name is still going to be on the ballot. But nevertheless, again, this race could be, I think it's going to be the closest race in the country. It's probably going to be decided by a few thousand votes. And so even if the Libertarian candidate manages to boost Masters marginally, it could be enough to swing the balance in this state.
Oh, and don't tell me it'll be decided by a few thousand votes, and there'll be mail-in ballots, and they'll be counted over the course of the next several days. Come on, Tom, you're killing me.
It's going to happen in Arizona. It's going to happen in Pennsylvania. One place it's not going to happen is New Hampshire. We should have a number from New Hampshire on November 9th, and that is a state, again, very, very close. We have Maggie Hassan there leading by under 1 percentage point. Don Bolduc has really closed the gap. He's leading in 2 of the 4 polls that are in our Real Clear Politics average, and seems to be have some late momentum. So that's going to be also a very, very close race.
Well, and just a tough time for Democrats right now to sort of figure out how to stop the hemorrhaging or what front to fight on, because a month ago, New Hampshire wasn't even part of the conversation, Tom. So this just makes it that much harder for them to sort of, stick their thumbs in all the leaking holes in the dike.
Yeah, I mean, New Hampshire had a really late primary, September 13th, I believe, and it was a divisive primary. And then we didn't really have any fresh polling that was taken in New Hampshire for a couple of weeks. So a lot of attention was focused on these other races that we've been talking about. But when the polling came out, as we had seen, the shift in momentum toward Republicans has made this a very competitive race. They just had a debate there the other night. Home heating oil is a huge issue in the Northeast, the energy policy, and Don Bolduc did his best to try and pin that on Maggie Hassan. So we'll see. But again, that is going to be a very close race as well.
When we spoke last Friday, Tom, and I do appreciate you being our regular Friday guy here leading up to the midterms, there were a couple of races that were starting to pull away, and I just want to just sort of go through them quickly to see if there's been any change. First of all, Ohio Senate. Is that still looking pretty solid for Vance?
It is. There's a Signal, which is a Republican firm, turned out their last tracking poll this morning, which had Vance ticking up to +6. And I think DeWine's 21 or 22. So
Yeah.
that looks where, Republicans have come home, and I think undecideds are breaking toward Republicans in that state and in another states. So that looks like it's going to be a safe seat for the Republicans.
Same with Johnson in Wisconsin.
Tighter. We've had some, conflicting data here. The Marquette University Law School a few weeks ago it was Johnson +6. Now it's Johnson +2. So that race is not a done deal, but I think Republicans are feeling pretty good about where Johnson stands in Wisconsin.
Meanwhile, Lee Zeldin in New York for the governor's race, he was surging last week. Has he plateaued, or does he continue to look strong there? It's still going to be close, of course. It's a traditionally very heavy Democrat state.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're going to have to see. I think Lee Zeldin he's made this race competitive, and the question is, can he get all the way across the finish line? Not sure. The polls are showing that Kathy Hochul still has a 5-6 point lead in that range, and so I think he's going to need some extra help to get past the finish line.
Tom, in general, on a midterm election like this, I know it's hard to we have to keep remembering, because we want to talk in terms of national momentum, and not only is all politics local, but every single one of these elections is local. Is there such a thing as a national mood? If you're a Democrat right now and you're not getting a whole lot of good news, it makes it that much more challenging to get yourself out and vote, right? I mean, generally speaking, do you see things in the past in elections like this breaking in a certain direction based on how this starts to feel?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the natural course of these things, right? Is that undecideds are going to end up moving in one direction or another. That's why, we talk about these 4 or 5 Senate races, right? They're all close. They're all within a point. And one side's going to win the vast majority of it. It's not like you're going to see 2 states go one way and 2 states the other way. Somebody's going to have a good night on November 8th. And if it's Republicans, they're going to win 4 of 5 or maybe 5 of 5.
Yeah.
And if Democrats overperform and have great turnout and manage to stem the tide, they will hold on. These incumbents are going to hold on, barely, but they will hold on in a majority of these races. Same thing with the House of Representatives. So you do actually have late momentum, or sometimes it's actually early, but where the vast majority of the public, undecideds, independent voters move in a direction. And historically speaking, it's been for the out party, which is why Democrats are really battling history right now.
Now, I just want you to know that I go to Real Clear Politics every day, regardless of whether it's a few days before an election or not. And one of the real valuable things you have there is historical data. You keep all of this polling data for these elections year after year after year. And you've got a great feature now that shows how one party or another underperforms historically in the polls, or they're underrepresented. Generally, it seems it's Republicans who are underrepresented. So you've actually made adjustments based on that underrepresentation in certain cases, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was this discussion a few weeks ago that popped up. Are the polls underestimating Republicans as they've done in the last few cycles, particularly 16 and 20? And so we went back. One of the ways that we wanted to try and give our readers and our viewers a chance to understand that and evaluate that claim or that question is going back into each of these individual states, looking at the numbers in 16, 18, and 20, and then putting out where those, which side was underestimated at this particular moment in time during those cycles. And so that's a feature that we added to the site a few weeks ago. I think it's been helpful. It gives people a sense. Again, it's unknowable if the polls are undercounting Republicans, overcounting Republicans. Right. We won't know that until November 9th or beyond. But I think generally speaking, for the past few cycles at least, Republicans have been undercounted more often than not.
Real fast, you have a Real Clear Politics projection right now. Obviously, it's just a projection, and it's based on these latest polls. But what's it looking like for the House and the Senate?
House, we've got it at about 31 seats. Republican pickup. Senate's GOP 4. +4, which is they win all of those Senate seats that we just talked about, and they hold on in all of the open seats. Now, we will issue a final projection on, I think, Monday, maybe even Tuesday morning, and based on late-breaking data that comes in over the weekend. But that's where we are right now, and we'll see where it goes from here.
All right, we certainly will, and we'll be checking Real Clear Politics a lot over the course of the next several days, and every day after that, I promise. Tom Bevan, thank you, sir. Appreciate you joining us. More to come on O'Connor Tonight.